Today on the BRS 160, we're gonna get sand in this tank. Hey guys, my name is Ryan. Welcome to another week of the BRS 160, where every week we do our best to help you guys, members of the reefing community, enjoy your tanks and find new ways to explore the hobby. We do that by following the setup and progression of this 160-gallon reef tank. This week we're going to talk sand, why we use it, the different types, live versus dry, depths, best place to buy sand, how to properly maintain your sand, and what we selected for the BRS 160. In the reef tank, sand provides surface area for beneficial bacteria to populate and filter your tank. However, if you have enough live rock or some filtration media in the sump, it's probably not required for that purpose. The main reason reefers use sand is purely aesthetic appeal. Everyone has a different idea of what nice looks like, but most of us prefer the tank to have some type of sand. The biggest differences between sands is size of grain and to some degree color. The Carib-Sea Oolite is the finest grain sand and looks the most similar to picturesque sandy beaches. Most people will universally agree it looks the best, and it's the best sand for sand sifting fish like diamondback gobies. However, the fine-grained oolite sand is between 1/4 of a millimeter and 1 millimeter and blown around very easily with typical flow in reef tanks. This is especially true in tanks that use constant-on AC pumps. If you use this type of pump on the side, you'll blow all of the sand out of the center of the tank. With pumps on the back, you'll blow all the sand out the front of the tank. Even with DC controllable pumps that vary the flow, you'll likely have some of these issues over time, as well as create dust storms in the tank. Really, the only time I'd personally consider oolite is in a deeper tank with a deeper sand bed and low flow. The Carib-Sea Fiji Pink is the most popular sand, probably because they add these tiny pink chips to the sand mix. It does add some color to the sand, but it's not super noticeable once it's in the tank. It's also a bit larger than the oolite with an average size of 1/2 to 1 millimeters. However, it does still blow around fairly easily. The Carib-Sea Special Grade is our second most popular, probably because it's the best compromise between the attractive small grain look and the heavier grains which are more likely to stay put in the tank. With an average grain size of 1 to 2 millimeters, it's missing those smaller grains that are blown around so easily. If you're looking for something that's more likely to stay put in the tank regardless of how high the flow is, something like the Carib-Sea Florida Crushed Coral, which is 2.5 to 5 millimeters, might be your best bet. However, this large grain is not good for some small fish that like to sift through the sand for food. Another option in the middle of all this is the Ocean Direct Original Grade, which has a really wide range of sand grains with 1/4 of a millimeter all the way up to 6.5 millimeters. I find it to be somewhat like if you mixed oolite or Fiji Pink with crushed coral. It tends to separate out with the smaller grains in low flow areas, but the entire surface of the bottom of the tank will likely stay covered in most cases. Outside of size, there's a couple color options as well, with the pink flakes I mentioned in the Fiji Pink, but also options like the Hawaiian Black. Black is an interesting look, but not as popular, probably because the grain size is pretty large, and it doesn't have the same natural look and buffing properties as the typical calcium carbonate-based sands we've been talking about. Once you've selected the right size and color, sand comes in two forms, live and dry. Dry sand is, as it sounds, dry sand void of any type of life. Live sand comes with beneficial bacteria which help populate your tank and filter it. There's some debate on how valuable this is, but at the end of the day, they cost about the same in many cases, so it's kind of a moot point. Most of us would prefer to use live sand given the opportunity. There are a couple of different approaches to offering a live sand. The Carib-Sea Irregular is actually sand that has been dried and sifted to create those very tight windows of different sized grains within the different options, as well as remove any debris that might be in the sand. After sifting, it's bagged in water and a dormant bacteria is added to the bag, which will become active once it's added to the tank. For that reason, it's important not to rinse the sand or discard the water in the bag if you want to maximize the live effect with the sand. The Ocean's Direct takes a different approach. This sand is not dried, so it can't be sifted, and the reason why there's such a large range of sand grain sizes in the original grade, it's also shipped damp, but there's no water in the bag, and they use a special breathable plastic bag. This combination allows them to maintain the natural bacteria from the ocean, which is obviously preferable. They also say this method preserves over 1,000 times as much bacteria as other preservation methods. Other than the less predictable grain size associated with the original grade, the only complaint I commonly hear is how long it takes to settle out. While the sifted Irregular often settles out in hours, the original grade can take days before the initial cloud clears. Next question is how much and how deep. The most common range is anywhere from 1/2 inch to 2 inches. For the most part, this is just really a balance between aesthetics and the sand becoming a nutrient sink. Shallow sand beds as low as 1/2 inch are popular because it's really easy to maintain the sand and keep it clean. A couple of sand sifting fish might even be enough. However, it's a lot easier for bare spots to appear in these shallow sand beds. Sandbeds as deep as 2 inches sometimes look nicer, and it's much more difficult to create bare spots from strong flow. However, most reefers find sand to be a huge nutrient sink, and the reason most reefers would never go beyond 2 inches. The sand is just a place where all the tank debris settles out and often just full of unwanted nutrients. If you end up on the deeper side, you're going to have to put more effort into clean the sand with your maintenance schedule. I think a 1-inch sand bed is a pretty good compromise. It's fairly easy to keep clean and will likely keep the bottom of the tank covered. If not, you can always adjust the flow and add more sand later. To identify how much sand you need, there's handy calculators on places like Reef Central, and I wouldn't be surprised if you found one on our site in the near future. It depends a bit on the type of sand you buy, but in general, 10 pounds of sand will cover 1 square foot. So a 2x4 foot tank like a 120 would have 8 square feet and require around 80 pounds of sand. Sand isn't really cheap, so where's the best place to buy sand? If you're looking for the small grain oolite and don't mind that it blows around or have a low flow tank, I do a quick search for bulk sand from the Bahamas because there's some online vendors that sell that type of sand for cheap. Note that what you're usually getting is truly bulk sand that hasn't been processed in any way and isn't live. You might have to also use some type of strainer to remove the smallest particles for the average reef tank. Beyond that, sand is not a very expensive item itself. It's shipping this heavy sand all over the country that costs so much. This is best done on pallets via freight rather than individual boxes via services like UPS. This means your local fish store probably has about the same prices as online stores and might even be less. Some reefers will try and reuse sand they either have laying around from other tanks or bought off something like Craigslist. I really don't suggest using old sand because it's a nutrient sink and not a good way to start a new reef tank, but if that's what the budget demands, the best way I've found to clean it is throw some in a 5-gallon bucket and push a hose to the bottom. This will tumble the sand, scrape off the loose organics, and hopefully flush it over the side. 10 minutes with each bucket is probably suitable. Once you have the sand up and running in your tank, you're absolutely going to want to maintain it and keep it free of debris that's going to pollute the tank over time. One method of that is some sand sifting critters like diamondback gobies, crabs, Nassarius snails, and stars. You also have to siphon the sand at least once a month. There are a couple siphon manufacturers out there. My personal favorite is a Python, mainly because they have adapters for basically every sink out there. The sink connection fitting is metal rather than plastic, so it lasts longer. Python systems are guaranteed to be BPA, arsenic, and lead free, as well as made in the US. This is enough for me to select it over other options, which are basically the same price. They come in 2 options, one that connects directly to the sink and one that will empty into a bucket. The trick with using these is you don't want to suck up the sand into your sink or hose. We just want to tumble the sand and remove all the detritus from the sand that's polluting the tank. Easiest way to control this is just bend the hose in your hand and use it to control the flow rate. This is the simplest way to get a really good cleaning out of the sand, suck up everything without getting a ton of sand in your sink, your siphons tube, or bucket. Before we move on, the last piece of all this is reefers will commonly forego sand entirely in favor of a bare bottom tank. This makes maintenance easier, costs less to set the tank up, and removes the nutrient sink from the tank. I'm always super tempted to do this myself, but at the end of the day, I just like the look of sand and the critters in it, so I've never done a bare bottom myself. On the BRS 160, we narrowed it down to 2 options with the Ocean's Direct Original Grade because I appreciate the concept of natural ocean bacteria, especially in a tank started with dry rock. But we ultimately selected the Carib Sea Special Grade Reef because I like the more uniform grain sizes and lack of huge 6mm particles. This tank is 6 feet by 2 and has a total of 12 square feet to cover, so we use 6 20-pound bags. Notice we added the sand after the rock. This is because the rock needs to sit directly on the bottom of the tank to be stable long term. Well, this isn't typically an issue on glass. The phantom bottom of the ReefSavvy tank makes it absolutely safe. Once you have all the sand in the tank, add the clarifiers included in the bag and it should clear up in hours, but certainly overnight. Just remember not to rinse the sand and use the water in the bag because this is where a lot of the dormant bacteria is. We're now ready to start cycling the tank. Next week we're going to do that exact thing, start cycling this tank. We're going to cover the complete nitrogen cycle. Even though most reefers have a pretty decent grasp on this, I think we're going to share something you may have never heard before, so hit that subscribe button. If you're interested in learning more about the sand we talked about in today's video, check out this link. If you'd like to make Dave our BRStv Editor's Day, give us a quick thumbs up. See you next week with week 13 of the BRS 160, the nitrogen cycle and cycling the tank.